I thought I'd lost everything when my ex-husband's family called me a gold digger in front of the judge. But then my 8-year-old son walked to that witness stand, looked his father straight in the eye, and revealed a secret that made even the judge cry. What he said next changed our lives forever. My name is Poppy Hartwell, and 6 months ago, I was fighting the most important battle of my life. Not for money, not for revenge, but for the right to raise my own children. You see, when you're a single mother going up against a wealthy family in family court, the truth becomes your only weapon. And sometimes that truth comes from the most unexpected place. This is about my son Jasper, who's 8 years old and braver than any adult I know, and my daughter Imogen, who's 5 and still believes the world is fundamentally good. This is about my ex-husband Sebastian, who thought money could rewrite history. His sister Cordelia, who never liked me from day one of our marriage, and his mother Beatrice, who made it her mission to prove I was an unfit mother. For months they painted me as a woman who cared more about Sebastian's bank account than her own children. They had expensive barristers, character witnesses, and what seemed like an endless budget to destroy my reputation. I had the truth, an overworked solicitor, and 2 children who loved me unconditionally. But here's what Sebastian's family didn't count on. They didn't count on an 8-year-old boy who had been watching everything, listening to everything, and finally deciding he couldn't stay quiet anymore. What Jasper said in that courtroom didn't just change the judge's mind. It changed everything we thought we knew about courage, about family, and about what children are really capable of when the adults around them fail. This isn't just a story about a custody battle. This is about what happens when a child decides to protect his mother the same way she's always protected him. And trust me, you're not prepared for what my little boy was brave enough to say. Because sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to someone who barely reaches the witness stand. Let me take you back to where this all began. 2 years ago, I was living what I thought was a perfect life. Sebastian and I had been married for 8 years, and I genuinely believed we were happy. We had our beautiful home in Surrey, 2 amazing children, and I was working as a pediatric nurse at the local hospital. I loved my job because helping sick children gave my life purpose. But Sebastian never quite understood that passion. The cracks started showing when Sebastian's property development business really took off. Suddenly, he was making more money than we'd ever dreamed of. And with that success came a different version of the man I married. He started staying late at the office more often, taking weekend business trips, and when he was home, he seemed distant. I tried talking to him about it, but he'd brush me off, saying I wouldn't understand the pressure he was under. You get to play with children all day, he'd say when I came home exhausted from a 12-hour shift. I'm out there building our future. It stung every time because what I did wasn't playing. I was helping families through their worst moments, holding the hands of parents whose children were fighting for their lives. But Sebastian saw my work as less important than his. And eventually, I started believing him. The children sensed the tension before I did. Jasper, who had always been my sensitive, observant little boy, started asking why Daddy seemed angry all the time. Imogen, my bubbly 5-year-old, began clinging to me more, as if she could feel the foundation of our family shifting beneath her feet. I tried to shield them from our problems, putting on a brave face, and maintaining our bedtime routines, family dinners, and weekend outings. But children see everything, even when we think we're protecting them. The end came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for work when Sebastian walked into our bedroom with the kind of expression that makes your blood run cold. "I can't do this anymore, Poppy," he said, not even looking me in the eye. "I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time." At first, I thought he meant his job or some midlife crisis. I suggested counseling, maybe a vacation, anything to fix whatever was broken. But then he told me about Charlotte, his 26-year-old personal assistant. They'd been having an affair for 8 months. 8 months of him coming home and kissing me goodnight, helping Jasper with his homework, reading bedtime stories to Imogen, all while living a complete lie. "I'm moving out this weekend," he said as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "Charlotte and I have found a flat in London. We'll figure out the custody arrangements later." I remember standing there in my nursing scrubs trying to process what he just said. Later. He was talking about our children like they were weekend plans that could be rearranged. When I asked him how we were going to tell Jasper and Imogen, he shrugged and said, "You're better with that emotional stuff." The conversation I had with my children that evening was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Jasper listened with the serious expression he gets when he's trying to understand something complicated. When I finished explaining that Daddy was going to live somewhere else for a while, he asked, "Did we do something wrong, Mom?" My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Imogen's response was even worse. She simply said, "Okay, Mommy," and went back to coloring as if nothing had happened. But that night, I found her crying in her bed, clutching the teddy bear Sebastian had given her for her birthday. The months that followed were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and trying to maintain some sense of normality for the children. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to pay for my solicitor, which meant less time with Jasper and Imogen right when they needed me most. Sebastian, meanwhile, seemed to be enjoying his new life. He moved into a massive house in Chelsea with Charlotte, complete with a swimming pool in a garden that was bigger than our entire previous property. Every other weekend, he'd pick up the children for his scheduled time, and they'd come back talking about the amazing things they'd done at Daddy's big house. I tried to be happy for them, but it was torture. Here I was struggling to make ends meet, working myself to exhaustion, while Sebastian got to be the fun parent who took them to expensive restaurants and bought them whatever they wanted. What I didn't know was that Sebastian's family had already decided I was the villain in this story. To them, I was the wife who couldn't keep their golden boy happy. The woman who was now trying to take him for everything he was worth. They had no idea that I'd never asked for anything more than enough to take care of our children. But the truth didn't matter to them. The stage was set for a battle I never wanted to fight, but one I absolutely had to win. The family court hearing was scheduled for a rainy Thursday morning in October, and I barely slept the night before. I'd been preparing for this day for months, but nothing could have prepared me for what Sebastian's family had planned. When I walked into that courtroom with my solicitor, Mr. Davies, I felt like I was walking into an execution. Sebastian sat at the opposite table with his expensive barrister, Mr. Thornfield, a man who looked like he charged more per hour than I made in a week. But it wasn't Sebastian who worried me most. It was the 3 women sitting in the gallery behind him. Cordelia, his sister, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Beatrice, his mother, with her perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of cold stare that could freeze water. And Charlotte, Sebastian's girlfriend, who had the audacity to show up to a custody hearing about children that weren't even hers. The proceedings started normally enough. My solicitor presented our case, explaining that I was seeking primary custody while allowing Sebastian reasonable access to the children. We outlined my stable employment history, my clean record, and the children's strong attachment to me as their primary caregiver. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until Mr. Thornfield stood up for Sebastian's side. "Your Honor," he began in that posh accent that made everything sound more important than it was. "We will demonstrate today that Mrs. Hartwell's primary motivation in this custody dispute is financial gain, not the welfare of these children. My client's family will testify to a pattern of manipulative behavior that has escalated since the separation." My stomach dropped. I knew they were going to attack my character, but hearing it said so formally in court made it feel real and terrifying. Then Cordelia was called to the witness stand, and my worst fears began to unfold. "I've known Poppy for 9 years, Cordelia said, her voice dripping with fake concern. From the very beginning, it was clear she was attracted to my brother's potential rather than my brother himself. She pushed him to work longer hours, to take on bigger projects, always talking about the lifestyle she wanted for the children. I wanted to scream. Cordelia had never liked me. Not from the first day Sebastian brought me home to meet the family. She'd made snide comments about my background, my job, even my clothes. And now she was sitting there lying under oath, making me sound like some kind of gold-digging monster. After the separation, Cordelia continued, Poppy's behavior became increasingly concerning. She would drop the children off at our house looking unkempt and clearly distressed. When I asked Jasper if everything was okay at home, he told me his mother cried a lot and made him feel bad about loving his father. That was a complete fabrication. Yes, I had cried after the divorce, but never in front of the children, and I had certainly never made them feel guilty about loving Sebastian. I looked at my solicitor, Mr. Davies, who was scribbling notes furiously, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Then Beatrice took the stand and somehow managed to be even worse than her daughter. Your Honor, I've been concerned about those precious children for months. When they visit us, they're hungry, Their clothes are too small, and they seem anxious all the time. Jasper told me that his mother works so much that he has to make dinner for himself and his little sister. The lies were so outrageous. I felt dizzy. Yes, there had been nights when I worked late and the children had cereal for dinner, but that happened maybe 3 times in 6 months, and their clothes weren't too small. I'd bought them new uniforms at the beginning of the school term, just like every other parent. Furthermore, Beatrice continued, her voice taking on a theatrical quality. Poppy has been poisoning those children against their father. She tells them that Sebastian doesn't love them anymore, that he chose Charlotte over them. She's using those babies as weapons in her vindictive campaign against my son. I felt like I was going to be sick. Every word out of her mouth was a lie, but she said it with such conviction that I started to worry the judge might believe her. I glanced over at Sebastian, expecting to see some sign of discomfort with his family's performance, but he just sat there nodding along like everything they said was gospel truth. The worst part came when Mr. Thornfield presented their evidence. Photos of the children eating cereal for dinner taken during one of Sebastian's visits when I'd worked a double shift at the hospital. Screenshots of Jasper's school reports showing his grades had dropped slightly since the divorce. A letter from Imogen's teacher mentioning she'd been having some behavioral issues in class. Everything had an explanation, but Mr. Thornfield presented it like I was an unfit mother who neglected her children while chasing alimony payments. I watched the judge taking notes and felt my world crumbling around me. These people were going to take my children away from me with lies and twisted evidence, and there was nothing I could do to stop them. After Beatrice stepped down from the witness stand, I felt like I was drowning. The courtroom felt smaller, the air thicker, and every lie they'd told was hanging in the space between me and the judge like a fog I couldn't clear. Mr. Davies leaned over and whispered, "We need to counter this aggressively, Poppy. Do you have any witnesses who can testify to your character as a mother?" I had prepared for this. My supervisor from the hospital was supposed to testify about my dedication and reliability. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had agreed to speak about how she'd seen me with the children countless times, always patient and loving. But sitting there listening to Sebastian's family systematically destroy my reputation with such calculated precision, I realized that character witnesses weren't going to be enough. They had money, they had lawyers, and they had a narrative that painted me as a manipulative woman who put money before her children. That's when I noticed Jasper. He'd been sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom with my mother, who had taken the day off work to watch the children during the hearing. Imogen was coloring in a book, oblivious to what was happening around her. But Jasper was different. He was sitting ramrod straight, his hands clenched in his lap, staring at his father with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly, but something deeper, disappointment, maybe, or determination. During the brief recess, I walked over to check on them. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked Jasper, kneeling down to his level. "Mom," he said, his voice unusually serious for an 8-year-old. "They're saying things about you that aren't true." My heart broke a little. "I know, darling, but that's what lawyers do sometimes. They say things to try to win, even if those things aren't completely accurate." "But they're lying," Jasper insisted, his voice getting stronger. "Aunt Cordelia said, you make me feel bad about loving Daddy, but you never said that. You always tell me it's okay to love Daddy. And Grandma Beatrice said, you don't feed us properly, but you make us proper dinners except when you have to work late, and then you always say sorry." I looked into my son's eyes and saw something that terrified and amazed me at the same time. He understood what was happening. He understood that his mother was being attacked and he wanted to do something about it. "Mom," he said, grabbing my hand, "I need to tell them the truth. I need to tell the judge what really happens." My first instinct was to protect him. "Oh no, sweetheart. You don't need to worry about any of this. This is grown-up stuff, and it's not your job to fix it." "But they're lying about you," he repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "And if I don't tell the truth, they might take me and Imogen away from you. I can't let that happen." I felt my world tilt on its axis. Here was my 8-year-old son offering to walk into a courtroom full of adults and defend his mother against trained lawyers and manipulative relatives. The protective part of me wanted to shield him from this ugly situation completely, but another part of me recognized something profound in his determination. When court reconvened, Mr. Davies was preparing to call our first character witness when I made a decision that would change everything. I tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "I want to put Jasper on the stand." Mr. Davies looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Poppy, he's 8 years old. Putting him in the middle of this could traumatize him." "He's already in the middle of it," I whispered back. "And he's the only person in this room who knows the whole truth about what our life has been like." Mr. Davies glanced over at Jasper, who was watching us intently. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Once we do this, there's no taking it back." I looked at my son, this brave little boy who had been watching his family fall apart for months and had somehow found the courage to want to fight for what was right. "Jasper," I called softly, and he came over to us. "Do you really want to talk to the judge?" I asked him. "You don't have to do this, sweetheart. You don't have to say anything that makes you uncomfortable." Jasper looked at me with those serious eyes that seemed too old for his face. "Mom, they're saying you don't love us properly, but you love us more than anything in the whole world. Everyone should know that." Mr. Davies sighed and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Jasper Hartwell to the stand." The courtroom went completely silent. Sebastian's barrister immediately objected, arguing that it was inappropriate to involve such a young child, but Jasper was already standing up, smoothing down his school uniform and walking toward the front of the courtroom with more composure than most adults could manage. As I watched my little boy prepare to defend his mother, I realized that sometimes the people we try hardest to protect end up being the ones who protect us. The moment Jasper walked to the witness stand, the entire atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. This 8-year-old boy, barely tall enough to see over the wooden barrier, commanded more attention than any of the expensive lawyers or dramatic family members who had spoken before him. The judge, Mr. Justice Peton, leaned forward with a gentle expression and spoke in the softest voice I'd heard from him all day. "Hello, Jasper. I'm Judge Peton. You don't need to be nervous. All right. I just want to ask you a few questions about your mommy and daddy. Is that okay?" Jasper nodded, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Yes, sir. Can you tell me what it's like living with your mommy?" For a moment, Jasper was quiet, and I could see him organizing his thoughts the way he did when he was working on a difficult math problem at school. When he finally spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "Living with mommy is good. She works really hard at the hospital helping sick children. And sometimes she comes home tired, but she always asks about my day and helps me with my homework. When Imogen has bad dreams, mommy sits with her until she falls asleep, even if it's really late. And when I'm worried about something, she listens to me and explains things so I understand better." I felt my throat tighten with emotion, but I forced myself to stay quiet. This was Jasper's moment. "What about living with your daddy?" the judge asked gently. Jasper's expression became more complicated. "I love my daddy very much, but things are different now. At Daddy's house, there are lots of rules I didn't have before. Charlotte makes the rules mostly. She says I have to call her Auntie Charlotte and that I can't talk about Mommy when I'm there because it makes Daddy sad." The judge raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're not allowed to talk about your mommy when you're with your daddy." "No, sir. Charlotte says it's not fair to Daddy because he's trying to move on with his life. But sometimes I miss Mommy when I'm there, especially when Imogen cries for her at bedtime." Sebastian's face had gone pale, and I could see him shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. Thornfield was scribbling notes frantically, probably preparing objections. "Jasper," the judge continued, "some people have said that your mommy doesn't take good care of you and your sister. What do you think about that?" This was the moment that changed everything. Jasper sat up straighter, and for the first time since he'd taken the stand, his voice carried a hint of indignation. "That's not true, sir. Mommy takes really good care of us. She makes us breakfast every morning and packs our school lunches with little notes that make us smile. When we're sick, she stays home from work, even though I know she worries about the sick children at the hospital. She taught me how to tie my shoes and how to be kind to people who are different from us." Jasper paused, glancing over at his father and then back at the judge. "The people who said those things don't know what our real life is like. They only see us sometimes, and they don't understand that Mommy working hard doesn't mean she doesn't love us. It means she loves us so much that she'll do anything to take care of us." But then came the revelation that no one saw coming. "Sir," Jasper said, his voice becoming smaller but somehow more powerful. "I need to tell you something that I promised I wouldn't tell. But Mommy always says that telling the truth is more important than keeping promises that hurt people." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the rain pattering against the windows. Even Cordelia had stopped whispering to Beatrice. "Daddy told me that if I said Mommy was mean to me, I could live in his big house with the swimming pool all the time. He said Mommy just wanted his money and didn't really love me and Imogen the way he did. But that's not true. And I told Daddy it wasn't true." Sebastian's barrister started to stand up, but the judge held up his hand for silence. Jasper's voice grew stronger as he continued. "And Charlotte told me something else. She said that when I turn 18, I can choose never to see Mommy again if I want to. She said, Daddy would buy me a car when I'm old enough to drive if I told you today that I wanted to live with them forever." The gasp that went through the courtroom was audible. I saw Beatrice cover her mouth with her hand, and Cordelia looked absolutely horrified. Sebastian had gone from pale to completely white. "But I don't want a car or a swimming pool if it means lying about my mommy," Jasper said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "My mommy taught me that love isn't about buying things or having the biggest house. Love is about being there when someone needs you, and Mommy is always there when I need her." The judge had tears in his eyes as Jasper delivered his final statement. "I love my daddy, but I won't lie about my mom. She's the best mom in the world, and she deserves for everyone to know the truth." The silence that followed Jasper's testimony was deafening. Judge Peton wiped his eyes with a handkerchief and called for an immediate recess. As the courtroom cleared, I rushed to Jasper and pulled him into the biggest hug of my life. He buried his face in my shoulder and whispered, "Did I do okay, Mom?" I told him he was the bravest person I'd ever known. Sebastian's barrister tried desperately to salvage their case when court reconvened. Mr. Thornfield argued that Jasper had been coached, that an 8-year-old couldn't possibly understand the complexities of adult relationships. But the damage was done. The specific details Jasper had shared, the genuine emotion in his voice, and the way his testimony directly contradicted his father's family's claims made it impossible to dismiss as rehearsed. Judge Peton's ruling was swift and decisive. He awarded me primary custody of both children, with Sebastian receiving supervised visitation every other weekend until he completed a court-mandated co-parenting program. The judge specifically noted that any attempts to manipulate the children or poison them against either parent would result in further restrictions on access. "This court," Judge Peton said, looking directly at Sebastian, "will not tolerate attempts to bribe or coerce children into making false statements against their mother." The courage shown by this young boy in speaking the truth despite pressure to do otherwise is a testament to the values his mother has instilled in him. The months that followed weren't easy, but they were healing. Sebastian did complete his co-parenting program, and slowly, very slowly, he began to rebuild his relationship with the children on honest terms. He never apologized to me directly, but his behavior changed. The bribes stopped, the manipulation ended, and for the first time since our divorce, he started acting like a father instead of a competitor. Charlotte, interestingly enough, disappeared from the picture within 3 months. Apparently, dealing with the reality of being a stepmother to children who wouldn't be bought was less appealing than she'd imagined. Sebastian's family took much longer to come around. Cordelia and Beatrice maintained their distance, though they stopped actively trying to undermine me. I considered that progress. The most important change was in my children. Jasper, who had carried the weight of our family's secrets for so long, seemed lighter after telling the truth. His grades improved. He started smiling more, and he even joined the school's debate team. "I like speaking up for what's right," he told me when I asked why he wanted to do it. Imogen, too, began to flourish once the custody battle was over, and our home became peaceful again. Her nightmares stopped, her anxiety faded, and she went back to being the bubbly, confident little girl she'd always been. Both children maintained a relationship with their father, but now it was built on honesty rather than manipulation. As for me, the experience changed my perspective on everything. I realized that trying to protect my children from the truth hadn't actually protected them at all. Children are far more perceptive than we give them credit for, and they deserve honesty delivered in age-appropriate ways. I also learned that sometimes the people we least expect can show the most courage. I've since left my position at the hospital to work as a family advocate, helping other parents navigate custody disputes and family court proceedings. Every day, I meet mothers and fathers who are terrified of losing their children to lies and manipulation. I tell them Jasper's story, and I remind them that truth has a power that money can't buy. The experience taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being 8 years old standing in a room full of adults who are lying about your mother and deciding to speak the truth anyway. Courage is choosing what's right over what's easy, even when you're scared. Today, 2 years later, Jasper is 10 and Imogen is 7. We live in a smaller house than we did during my marriage, but it's filled with laughter, honesty, and love. Sebastian sees the children regularly now, and while our relationship will never be friendly, it's civil and focused on what's best for Jasper and Imogen. Sometimes people ask me if I regret putting Jasper on that witness stand. The answer is no. Not for a single second. That day, my son didn't just save our family. He taught me that the truth spoken with love and courage is the most powerful force in the world. The most important lesson I learned is this. Never underestimate the wisdom of a child who loves you. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room has the biggest truth to tell.